Welcome to the Brightside of Longevity. Join host Dr. Roger Landry along with co-host Danielle Palli and guests as they discuss the bright side of getting older through healthy longevity. Guided by research, this lighthearted and educational show will leave you with practical ways to brighten your life's journey.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Bright Side of Longevity. I am here, Dr. Roger Landry, and I am here with my esteemed colleague, Danielle Palli. How are you, Danielle? So good to be with you.
Good to see you. And we took a little break while you were traveling, so it's good to get back together and do a podcast.
You know, I was thinking the other day, someone asked me, if you could dine with anyone, who would you dine with? It could be living, could be dead. Who would it be? You know, you get a variety of answers, and I probably have several people, but a name that just popped right into my head fairly quickly was Nelson Mandela. He has been a hero of mine for such a long time. I think most of you know his story, but he was he was a revolutionary against apartheid in South Africa. And he was sent to jail. He was in jail for 26 years. He was finally released when they began to loosen up on apartheid. He worked with the president then to get rid of apartheid. And within, I think it was 2 or 3 years, he was the president of South Africa. Okay, now I got the power. I can get all these people who threw me in jail for 26 years, right? No, not him. Nelson Mandela felt for the good of the country, for his own health, for the good of the world, that it was time to move on and work together to build a better South Africa. Now, that is sort of forgiveness in the spotlight, isn't it?
Yeah, to not use that opportunity to get back at people and to be forgiving.
I'd like to think that I could be that way, but I don't know.
No, I don't know. I don't know that I'm there.
But you and I have talked about forgiveness. We've talked about stress. We've talked about health. We've talked about so many things that relate to this whole topic of forgiveness. And it seems like in the world today, there's a lot of things that make us unwilling to forgive, that things that are happening either personally or within the world where we find it very difficult to forgive. So I thought it'd be a great topic. You agreed. And I know you have extensive knowledge on this, have done research on it. Yeah. And as a nationally certified positive psychology and mindfulness coach, you talk to people about this frequently, both those who cannot forgive and those who cannot be forgiven or are finding it hard to be forgiven.
Yes. And I'm glad we're having this conversation because I think people don't realize how nuanced forgiveness is. It's not just, oh yeah, I forgive and forget. There's so much more to it. So I'm glad we're having this discussion.
So as humans, we talk about, our chattering mind, and we've heard the statistics anywhere from 60 to 60,000 thoughts a day, most of which are negative and repetitive. So we know what happens when someone has harmed us or has in some way caused us to be angry at them, insulted us, humiliated us, did something to, that worked against our life plan, whatever it is. And how I think the word stew is probably a good word to talk about it, don't you think?
Yeah, stewing, ruminating, replaying that scenario over and over and just getting angry and stressed out. Yeah.
Yeah, we know what's happening. I mean, the cortisol is raging even when we're sitting in a chair, this person comes into our mind, or we see them, or see the picture, or just, again, just think of whatever it was, and our bodies begin to respond as if we are being challenged, threatened, or the thing is happening right now. Cortisol, epinephrine, our heart's racing, blood pressure's up, uh, uh, definitely negative thoughts, not feeling good about the world, getting more and more angry, and this is like, I call it internally hemorrhaging, really, metaphorically speaking.
And people think, oh, you're angry about the thing that was done to you. But now it's almost like you're repeating the injury over and over again. And you wonder, why do I have digestive issues? Why am I suddenly in pain? It affects all areas of our being.
Yeah, and if you're looking for justice in the world, the person who did the harm to you probably doesn't even think about it anymore, or whatever, and you're there suffering. Your body is being harmed. You're chipping away at your health, your cognitive health, your emotional health, your physical health, making yourself more susceptible to cancer and to dementia, to heart disease and depression, sleep, all of these things. And it doesn't have to be that all at once, and sort of a one episode, but it's like a sine wave. It comes and goes, and just not healthy. So who's worse off between the two of you?
The forgiver or the person asking for forgiveness. In addition to that, not just the physical and mental strain. So we know that if we forgive, we're healthier, just in general. It's also the way to better relationships, more empathy, more self-compassion. And we end up with better open communication. So our relationships are better. We feel better. And I'm about to throw a wrench in the work because forgiveness is optional. And sometimes I think we put pressure on someone like, why haven't you forgiven them yet? But a person needs to forgive, I think, on their own timeline.
It, you know, let's be selfish about it, okay? Uh, you know, if I keep this anger in me, this insult that occurred to me, I'm not as healthy, and my quality of my life is worse. If I forgive, on the other hand, I my health, all the parameters of health, positive thinking, lower blood pressure, less cortisol, less heart raging, the mental negativity, all of that gets better, and I'm better. So in some ways, you could say, thank you for whoever insulted me. You have given me the opportunity here to forgive you and have my health improve significantly because of it. Well, that's one way to look at it, right, Danielle?
That's for everyday people, and I'm for forgiveness is always the best option. But if somebody has had something deeply traumatic happen to them, whether it's abuse, any number of things, if we forgive and we're not ready to, it can also feel like it's an injury. So I always tell people, you forgive on your own timeline, even if people are saying, well, I can't believe you're still angry. You wait until you're ready. Now, but I can argue both sides of this for the next hour, Dr. Roger.
I bet.
If you're, say, let's use an example of a relationship in a marriage, and maybe the trust was broken for some reason. And now 10 years later, every time there's an argument, you start talking about the thing that happened 10 years ago, and you're not forgiving. Understand that the person who injured you or emotionally, or whatever it was, might not continue that relationship, and that relationship can fracture and suffer as. So yes, you forgive on your own timeline, but understand too that when you're ready to forgive, the relationship could be over and people could have moved on. Dr. Roger Landry is a preventive medicine physician trained at Tufts University School of Medicine and Harvard University School of Public Health. For nearly 2 decades, his focus has been on empowering older adults to experience a healthy longevity. He is the award-winning author of the book Live Long, Die Short, A Guide to Authentic Health and Successful Aging. Dr. Landry is an inspiring storyteller and presenter. His keynote addresses are powerful, entertaining, and optimistic. Learn more at livelongdieshort.com.
There's some horrible things that can happen and some things can be accidents, say a car accident that injures or even mortally injures someone you love. And it was recklessness or, drunk driving or whatever. That's hard to forgive. And for all the reasons we've talked about, it is a good thing to do, but there's a timeline for that. You are absolutely right, Danielle. But that's when we have to start looking at it from the point of view of our humanity and our empathy.
Yeah.
Could this have happened to you? Maybe not drunk driving, but just not paying attention for a minute and having inflicted some injury or even killed someone. To have the empathy on how that person may be suffering themselves for what they did, and compassion and empathy. So it's not only about you; it's certainly about the other person. Yeah.
Yeah, that's one tool that I hope people would take away is what you're talking about, perspective taking and understanding how you would feel if you were on the other side, and learning that when we do forgive others, it's a step towards self-forgiveness. When we remember a time where somebody forgave us, can we be that gracious to someone else? So I think the first tool is that perspective taking and understanding what the other person might have been going through. I'm sure you have more as well, Roger, for how the forgiver can learn to forgive.
I think this brings up a very important point. I think there's 2 more big points that we should address. One is about the person who is looking for forgiveness, and we'll get to that. But you bring up this other one about self-forgiveness. We're humans. We can do some horrible things. We're emotional creatures, and emotions can drive an action that we never intended, would do. But and for whatever reason, an emotion can be powerful. And so we certainly can seek forgiveness, and we'll talk about that. But self-forgiveness is so very important. Living a life where you're continually flagellating yourself, metaphorically, that's hell. That's hell's. How can someone do that? You deal with people all the time, Danielle, who are in this category.
We do a lot of work on self-compassion, whether it's self-compassion, mindfulness activities, and it's slow to kind of rebuild. But I think the big thing is a little reflection and understanding that the more you forgive yourself, the more you're going to be able to forgive others. It's just better all around for relationships. What's interesting in some of John Gottman's work, and he and his wife are the experts in marriages, and I'll use that as an example because they say self-criticism is so harmful to relationships, because if you consider yourself inadequate, you're on the lookout for what's not there in a partner, what isn't there in the relationship. So getting back to learning how to forgive yourself and self-compassion and learning to be less critical involves learning to also love and accept yourself, taking ownership for what happened, and perhaps even seeking out a coach or a counselor if there's a pattern of behavior that oh, I'm sorry, and then you do it again. Oh, I'm sorry, then you do it again, right? So the idea is to break the
Understandable. That's excellent feedback. I think some people, it's not bargaining per se, like if I did this and I'm going to make up for it, but it can be a redemption of sorts if indeed not only do we have compassion for the other person and have empathy. But if we're the offender, to forgive ourselves, sometimes we can't do that abstractly, and it requires that we, quotes, change our life in some way, to help others, to dedicate yourselves to uh, perhaps helping the unfortunate, helping the world, whatever. And whatever it takes for us to forgive ourselves. And if it results in the good world, a better world, well, why not? But have you seen people who do that sort of thing?
Who try to make amends, yes, who get the help they need to be better going forward, for sure.
Yeah.
But here I go, I'm going to be the devil's advocate. That doesn't mean that there's no taking responsibility.
Oh,
And
no.
there has to be some understanding that just because you've asked for forgiveness and you've learned to forgive yourself, that the person you did something, whatever the thing was, wrong to, is going to want to be in a relationship, whether that's a friendship, a working relationship, a partnership. So some of the things that I hear, for example, in an ideal situation, you do something to someone and you're like, oh, I can't believe I did that. I'm sorry. And you say, it's okay. I forgive you. The relationship goes on, whether it's a friendship, a partnership, whatever. That's the best case scenario. But what happens if you ask for forgiveness and you're not forgiven? Do you become angry and say, well, you should be over this by now? So you can't expect people to forgive on your timeline. And also, you can't expect forgiveness to feel better because it's not about you in that situation. So we're talking about self-compassion, but also recognizing this isn't all about you. So maybe you're asking for forgiveness, they're saying no, and you like, but I need it to feel better. But then that's your need, and that's not what they need.
Very complex topic. I'm so glad you have such experience with this. I just have, the little things that have happened in my life, like everybody else's life. Although there was a time when I was a training as a physician where um, uh, people, died. And I started to think about, well, what could have I had done differently? And this is when I was young. And it usually took mentors or older people to say, there was no way that you could have done anything to change this. And that helped. But when I was young and didn't know, if a patient died, I figured then I did something wrong. And
Oh.
that was a difficult time, but it was a learning experience for me. But so I guess that was a little different than the average person. But these points are so well taken, and taking responsibility, boy, accountability, more than ever. I think that is necessary in the world, because that's the sort of thing that will hopefully preclude you from doing it again. Or
Yeah. And what
so,
you're talking about, though, too, is being a doctor or being in any profession where lives depend on you. That really has to be an exercise in self-compassion, because there can be a lot of, because things happen. We're human. And I could see if someone dies, replaying the scenario over and over again and having trouble moving on until, fortunately, having somebody say to you, we can't save everybody. You didn't do anything wrong. But that's an excellent example of learning how to forgive yourself, because I I can't even imagine being in that kind of position. And I hope I never get to feel what that feels like.
was definitely a learning experience, I think it's part of being a good physician, being able to not only handle the responsibility and the stress and the potential negative outcomes, and so not only being technically expert, but also being emotionally resilient, not careless in any way, but just be able to take some bad things happening that you around you and being able to move on. I think we should go now to the other side of this topic. I did something I shouldn't have done to someone,
Mm.
and I
Yeah.
feel horrible about it. And I I'm thinking I'd love to be forgiven. I don't know how to do that. And so you deal, Danielle, probably a whole lot more than I ever have with this sort of thing professionally. And so what can you tell us about the person seeking forgiveness?
Yeah. So the best tip I could give for the person seeking forgiveness is obviously apologize. We've talked about making amends where possible, whether it's with that person or, as you indicated, doing some kind of charity work or something related to whatever that you feel like you want to do some kind of accountability to make amends. The exercise in self-compassion, to learn from it, to grow, to forgive yourself, and to seek out counseling or coaching if needed, if it's something that's a chronic pattern, such as, I'll just use the term infidelity. And you do it once and they forgive you, but then you keep doing it and expecting the person to forgive you, or lying, or there's any kind of trust broken. But also, I think you need to free the expectation that the other person is going to forgive you on your timeline, if at all, and understand that they might forgive you, but that doesn't mean you're going to still be in that relationship, whether it's a friendship, a work, a marriage. And you'll say, well, I thought we were going to forgive and forget. Well, a person may forgive you, but they might set a boundary to protect themselves. So, yeah, I forgive you for what you did, but I don't feel comfortable with this relationship anymore. And the forgiver, or the person who's being forgiven, has to understand that bridge is burned. And sometimes you just don't get what you want.
Yeah, relationships are broken and we lose connection, and it's unfortunate. But there are times when maybe both of you aren't in a place that you both need to be in order to resolve this.
Yeah, that's true. And sometimes distance can also make a difference. I mean, how many times you hear stories where people don't talk for 10 or 20 years, and then with time and a fresh perspective, they come back together and forgive each other. So it can happen. It's just when you're in that hot spot of asking for forgiveness, it's letting go of the expectation of what the other person's going to do.
Yeah, when you know someone very well, a technique, not a technique, that sounds too technical, a way forward can be just, as we've talked so many times before, about, looking at the positive, looking at it half full. This person has a number of fantastic qualities. This person has done so many nice things to me and to others, and this one time it didn't happen that way. And so focusing on the positive, it probably is at least one path forward.
Yeah. And I do hear from people when they do the personal growth, I wish I had done it years ago. I can't save this work relationship or this marriage or whatever it is, but I've learned and it's not going to happen again, and it's going to be better in the future. So looking at what did you learn from that experience as the forgiver and the person who's forgiving or being forgiven.
Great stuff. Very complex. Very practical, useful information, Danielle. Thank you. And do you have any last words for our listeners regarding the whole topic of forgiveness?
I think in the nutshell, forgiveness is the best way if you can. It's best for your mental and physical health. It's best for your relationships. And for the person who may have done something they feel bad about, self-compassion, taking accountability, and growing from it so that you can become a person that you respect.
Well said. Well, as a preventive medicine physician, I can't help but saying, okay, let's try to prevent it in the first place. We have empathy. Work in someone else's shoes, you're less likely to offend them. And if they do offend you, you can put yourself in their shoes and say, how would you feel about that? So a little empathy goes a long way, doesn't it?
It does. And I think you've nailed it. We should do a second episode just on communication. How
Oh,
not to need, if you communicate effectively, there's less likely that you're going to need to ask for forgiveness.
some years ago, you and I we wrote a thing on gender. Uh,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and it had to do with gender relations from the point of view of a woman, from the point of view of a man. Maybe that's in our future program too. That's something always. And now you're even more experienced than ever with your work, and so can do that. But I think next, I think what we should do is this whole interpersonal relationships and what's the divisiveness in the world. I think we should approach another topic, and that's about the need to be right. How about it next time?
I disagree. No, Dr. Roger, I'm on board.
Great answer. See, this is why I love working with you. Thank you, Danielle. Thanks everybody for tuning in, and we look forward to next time.
You've been listening to The Bright Side of Longevity with host and preventive medicine physician and award-winning author Dr. Roger Landry and co-host, nationally board-certified positive psychology and mindfulness coach Danielle Palli. If you like the show, please rate and review, and be sure to click to follow.